Hi again, I'm Flake. I am here to show you another budget deck that you can build using just commons and uncommon cards. This time we're going to go ahead and take a look at Saprolings. That is in the green and black mana pool. I'm going to give you a deck list and walk you through a little bit of a guide on how to play it so that you too can be competitive on the cheap. So building decks on the cheap isn't the easiest thing. Magic the Gathering tends to have a reputation for being a bit of a money game, and in MTGA, it's not all that much different. You need to open cards, and the cards have to be, open packs, and the cards that you get will have varying rarities, rare, mythic rare, all that other stuff. But to build the powerful decks, you kind of need a lot of more expensive stuff. But that's not always true. You can still have fun and be a little bit competitive with cheaper decks. Here, I've built a Saproling deck that uses only common and uncommon cards. So if you are kind of stretched for rare or mythic rare wild cards, then you can always build something that's still fun with just the first two being common and uncommon. So I'll walk you through a little bit of what the deck looks like. We'll go through the creatures first. And I've got 3 Llanowar Elves, a common card. This is a very good ramping mechanism card because you play it on turn 1 and on turn 2, if assuming you can again play another land, you pretty much have 3 mana to play with. So 3 of Llanowar Elves are in the deck. Down the line here, I also have the Spore Crown Thalid. I've got 4 of these because the deck is going to revolve around creating a lot of little Saproling tokens. And what he does is this creature will boost those Saprolings and get a lot of value off of the big board of these token creatures. This is an uncommon card. Having 4 of them in the deck is not necessarily unheard of, especially since it just makes all your other creatures pretty much much more powerful as you continue to play through the game. 4 times Deathbloom. These are fantastic cards as well because they leave a creature on the board once they get out of the way. The 3 attack and 2 body is not all that terrible. It's a fungus, so it will have a synergy with Spore Crown. And again, leaving a Saproling on the board for late game synergy, for board presence, is nothing to scoff at as well. Yavimaya, the Safford, this is another good card. This one similar to Deathbloom, but it a 2/2 body instead of a 3/2, but this one instantly generates a 1/1 green Saproling creature token. And like I said, this deck is going to revolve around the token creatures, which a lot of cheap decks tend to do because you don't have the luxury of having too many rares or mythic cards. So you'll want to kind of bank on the fact that you'll have a lot of smaller weenie creatures, as they're called. Down the road, here's an uncommon card, the Slimefoot. It's a legendary creature, so keep in mind you can only play 1 of these on the board at a time. But what this does is every time one of your Saprolings dies, you deal 1 damage to your opponent, and you gain a life. So there's a 2-point swing, 2-life swing every time one of your Saproling dies. Not to mention, late game, having this on the board, spending mana that you might not be able to spend otherwise, allows you to tap 4 mana and create a 1/1 Saproling. Again, creating that that board presence, that overwhelming sort of swarm mentality that the Saprolings will have. I've got 3 Chupacabras because they're just too good to ignore from the black category. As an uncommon card in a control aspect, this is a very, very easy pick to throw in there. And you might see a theme every time I make a black budget deck that this card will appear. Because again, this seems like it should be a rare card, but it's not. It's an uncommon card. 4 mana for a 2/2 body, sure, but it's destroy a creature your opponent controls. You've got to throw that in there. The Omnivore, Thalid Omnivore, is another good card to have because, again, synergizing with the Saprolings, this is going to allow you to have a cheap option at 4 mana that can potentially have the power or the impact of a much bigger card. What this does is you tap 1 mana and sacrifice another creature. Typically, your 1/1 Saprolings is what you're looking to do. And he gets +2/+2 into the end of the turn. So defense, attack, surprising things along those lines. You can have all kinds of good synergies with your Saprolings in the Omnivore. Not to mention, sacrificing an omnivore, sacrificing a Saproling, which is your primary target for this card, allows you to gain 2 life. So it's a little extra kickback on your side and some incentive to eat the Saprolings, which, given the art, he seems very happy to do. Down the road, what else do we have after Thalid? That's it for creatures. Now, I know that doesn't seem like a lot, but keep in mind, you're creating a lot of tokens with this deck, with the Saproling. So let's go into the enchantments and sorceries and instants. Fungal Infection, I have one of these. This is not the greatest card to have because it only gives a creature -1/-1, but early on, for lack of any other options, let's say you just draw swamps and you have a Landmore Elf in your hand, you're kind of stuck. This is okay to take a 1 strength unit off the board and also generate a 1/1 token. Also, I mean, you can always just use this just to create a token down the road. No harm, no foul. Moment of Craving, I've got one of these in here as well, an early game control piece for 2 mana, also allowing you to gain 2 life. Great control early on while you try to establish a board. Vicious Offering is a very good card to have in here. So what Vicious Offering does is for 2 mana, you give target creature -2/-2 until end of turn. Now you might think that, okay, Moment of Craving does the same thing with the added benefit of gaining 2 life, when in reality, Vicious Offering is more so the kicker aspect that you're playing. The kicker for this is that you sacrifice a creature. Keep in mind, you're always generating tokens, and tokens are expendable. Your Saprolings could be, you might give them names and feel all nice and cozy having them on the board, when in reality they're there purely for the main purpose of dying miserable deaths. Like little lemmings, they're going to do your good by dying. So in this case, the kicker for this card is to sacrifice a creature, sacrificing obviously one of your Saprolings, and it gives a creature -5/-5. Now this is great because the -5/-5 doesn't necessarily deal damage to a creature. So enrage abilities, stuff like that, you don't have to worry. The -5/-5 can certainly be a great piece, and this is a great trick to drop on your opponent who might think that he's in a better position than he is. It's also an instant, so no sorcery restrictions on that. Saproling Migration creates 2 1/1 Saproling tokens, green Saproling tokens, but the kicker here for an extra 4 for 6 mana is create 4 Saproling tokens. Again, flood the board with these bad boys, get those Saprolings, that Saproling army growing. Song of Freyalise. Now, here's a card that I was looking into, and although it is 2 mana, this is more of a mid-game card. This is something you'll play probably at 4 or 5 mana availability. What it does is when you play it, it allows your creatures to tap for mana. And on the 3rd tick of this enchantment, the saga, all your creatures get +1/+1 tokens, and then a temporary boost of Vigilance, Trample, and Indestructible. So you drop this down mainly when you have already some units on the ground, allows for more ramp ability, and everything that survives thereafter will get +1/+1 tokens on it. So I've got 2 of these in the deck. Down the list, I have another saga, Eldest Reborn. Now here's a card that was a late entry into this list. I toyed around with it. I thought that maybe this could be taken out for more control type cards, but I thought that this was not bad because it does kind of play as a bit of a control aspect. This is a late game card that when you play it, your opponent will sacrifice a creature or planeswalker, assuming that, when you end up playing it, he might have some big creatures. You'll get value there. Then he discards a card, which is annoying. But the 3rd kicker on this is that you'll be able to play a creature or planeswalker from a graveyard and under your control. So it's like a free creature later on. I've got 2 of these in here, which will help you for late game sustainability. And in the land category, 10 swamp, 10 forest seems about right. And I have got 4 foul orchards in here as dual lands. I don't think that there was much else for other land categories in here. I thought that this would work out decently. Of course, you can always make changes to this deck, but the synergies in this deck revolve around your Saprolings and your Saproling generation, not to mention their expendability. The fact that you can kill them off fairly confidently and still have a reasonable board, and getting the benefits of killing off those Saprolings will be good. You've got Saproling generation, you've got Saproling benefits from when they die, so you should be able to at least overwhelm your opponent and be somewhat competitive, at least in some of your games. And again, kicker later on, Eldest Reborn could probably get you some good some good game states later on in the game. So that is the list, and we're going to be moving on after this straight away to upgrading your deck with rares and mythics. So improving on this deck, let's say you like it, and you want to add a little bit of rare or mythic flavor to it, I've come up with 5 suggestions that you could that can upgrade the deck from being just something for fun to something that actually might have some competitive playability to it. So the first rare card that I've thought about would be the Verdant Force. Now the Verdant Force is a 7/7 for 8, which seems like a lot, but given the Saga and the Lanoir Elves, you have a little bit of ramp ability to get to this card. Now this card, what it does is at the beginning of each upkeep, create a 1/1 Saproling token creature. The 7/7 ability of this card, or body and strength of this card, is nothing to laugh at in itself, but it's not, obviously it's not completely devastating. Your opponent, by the time you play this, will likely have big creatures of itself, but the best part about this is that you'll be creating Saprolings to add to your synergies, creating them on the regular, keeping this thing alive, just generating that army, sacrificing your Saprolings with the other cards. This could be a great piece to add to this deck type. The next one that I was thinking about was the Tendershoot Dryad. Now the Tendershoot Dryad is doesn't seem all that overwhelming with just its body. It's a 5 mana 2/2, which is okay. But what it does is at the beginning of each upkeep, you're creating more tokens, more Saproling tokens, flooding the board with these things. But the best part about this is as you're creating the tokens, you're working your way towards getting the City's Blessing. So the Ascend aspect of this card is that all your Saprolings get a +2/+2 value to them. As you're generating them, this gets incredibly overwhelming for your opponent, and the Tendershoot Dryad then becomes a high value target for them to waste removal on. The 2/2 of the actual card itself is nothing all that spectacular to write home about, but the effects with the City's Blessing and the token generation from this is going to drive your opponent crazy. This is a fantastic card to throw on the board. It's not legendary. You can double up on these cards, triple up, quad up on them. If you have wild cards to burn, this is certainly something that you want to be looking at. Furthermore, I've got Path to Discovery. Path to Discovery is an enchantment that costs 4. Whenever a creature enters the battlefield under your control, it explores. So this will help with drawing lands, looking at cards, increasing the value of cards that you already have or that you're already playing. Assuming you don't draw a land, you'll get a boost on your opponent, on your creature. Your creatures that hit the table will get a little bit extra juice to them. This is something I thought would fit nicely in this deck in the early going, to cycle through your cards, look at what you got coming, and sort of formulate a plan of attack. Next up, easy peasy here, Tedzimok Primal Death. This is a super control-y card for late game. If you're getting overwhelmed by big minions, this is something that you can kind of invest to with mana that you might not be spending immediately by placing sort of target tokens on, or target counters on your opponent's minion. And when this minion finally hits the board for 6, which is not an exceptionally expensive creature for what it does, you drop it on the board and easy peasy, everything's gone. This is a card that I would suggest would fit nicely into some of the control elements to this deck. It's not an end all because it doesn't necessarily synergize with Saprolings, but in complementary to your Chupacabras, etc., this is a great card for late game to sort of drop and settle the board to a degree. It also has Death Touch, which is just an extra spice. Finally, in the rare category, this is a great card. I don't want to overuse this. I don't want to sort of plug it into too many swamp or black decks. What this card does, Vraska's Contempt, is just excellent. It's an instant for 4. A little bit pricey, but what the great part about this is that exile target creature or planeswalker, gain 2 life. No questions asked, nothing else, no other restrictions. It is an instant that just gets rid of a pesky planeswalker or a creature that is just driving you bananas. So packing one of these into your deck will, get rid of a Gideon, get rid of a Karn, any other kind of nonsense to that degree. I think that this deck could swarm and control at the same time, a little bit of elements of both, which could drive people crazy. So this is a card that I think you should definitely include in your renditions of this deck down the line. Finally, in the Mythic category, there is certainly a card that I would consider throwing in there, Liliana, Death's Majesty. The Mythic addition to this deck was kind of all over the place. There are so many good arguments you could put for all kinds of cards. But what I liked about this was that this was a late game changer. You know, her +1 ability is to create a 2/2 black zombie, a token. Put the top 2 cards of your library into your graveyard. But the good thing about this also is that at -3, the -3 ability is return target creature from your graveyard to the battlefield. It's a black zombie in addition to other things. The zombie aspect is cool, whatever, but it really doesn't synergize with anything. What we want from this, frankly, is just, again, flooding the board with creatures, putting zombies on the board. You know, you're discarding the top 2 cards of your library. So even if you do ditch a big creature, her -3 ability will put that creature on the battlefield essentially for free at the expense of her own life total. But this is a card that I thought would have some good implications on the deck. It's not a perfect fit, but it's definitely a strong fit. Down the line, of course, I will be doing much more videos for this theme of budget decks. If you have any suggestions to this deck itself, if I've missed anything that you thought would be applicable, or if you have any suggestions of archetypes or color combinations that you'd like to see some budget decks made out of, please follow me on Twitch, twitch.tv/watchflake, or on Twitter @watchflake. I'm all ears. I'd love to hear your suggestions, and I'll be making more videos in the future. And until then, be good to one another, and we'll talk soon.